When you're traveling, especially in places that you've never been to before, if there's a shooting near the place you're staying, would you stay or jet? And actually, how do you ever know as you're traveling if the place you're staying in is safe enough to actually stay in? Hey guys, I'm Anne, single mom, travel lover, currently living in Georgia, USA, and doing part-time RV life, but I've been traveling literally since the age of 2. And so if you've ever researched how to be safe while traveling, there's a lot of tips out there, from things like not driving when it's dark or not driving when you're tired, traveling with a battle buddy, somebody you trust. But a common advice that you're gonna hear is to always trust your gut.
Always, always, always trust my gut feeling.
And listen, facts, no truer words. However, how do you know when your gut is leading you astray?
I still don't know if this is legal.
Everything's legal in Mexico.
How do you know when your gut knows how to keep you safe? Is everyone's gut like magically efficient at this? No, they're not. You have to train your gut first. And that is so rarely taught. And the very first step in training your gut and teaching your gut is observation. It's being super present in the moment.
You sit at a cafe and you watch.
Actively listening and participating in the world around you. Like really digging in to what people are saying and doing. Observing your environment when you see things and you realize, maybe I should check the weather app. When you watch Sherlock Holmes movies, and there are tons of moments where he's literally just pausing in his activity to observe the things going on around him so that he knows the best next step.
But what has this got to do with that painting? I don't see.
You do see, you just don't observe.
Now, don't get me wrong, there are elements to my gut that I sometimes believe is just magical. But isn't it funny how the skill of this magical gut increases the more present I am and the more I observe in the world. Actual observations, not necessarily reading reports and studies. Those can actually derail you sometimes, but literally just sitting and watching. You learn so much about the world, you learn so much about yourself, and you are so much better to identify when a situation is perhaps not safe. Now, there's a couple of other skill sets that happen immediately after observing, and sometimes it's really easy for those 3 things to be lumped into one. I do it all the time myself, but the reality is honing the ability to observe, honing the ability to watch something, to see something, and not make a judgment just yet, right? Don't observe something and immediately ask, is this safe? Instead, observe it and just see it for what it is.
Somebody who practices the art of parkour would look at the average urban environment versus how a normal pedestrian would look at it. While you and I would just see roads and sidewalks and buildings and other people, somebody who's an expert in parkour is going to see a lot more naturally. They're going to see the most efficient way to get from point A to point B, whether it's ducking under a railing or vaulting over something, climbing up a wall, and you and I are just not going to see that.
If you follow a lot of van lifers, RV lifers, they talk about knowing when a Walmart or a rest stop is a safe place to sleep. You'll often see these same patterns. They arrive at the rest stop in the daylight, and while yes, they are probably setting up for sleep, they're also stopping to observe that particular area. They sit there and they listen. What are the sounds I'm hearing? How many people are around me? What are the things I'm seeing with the people around me? They're not jumping to, oh, this is safe, this is unsafe. They're stopping to observe. This is why when people ask me questions like, is it safe to sleep at a rest stop? While it's easy to give a flip answer like, oh my gosh, it's totally safe to sleep at rest areas, the truth is, it depends. And it depends on a lot of factors. And saying trust your gut is a super oversimplified explanation. Now, I know I keep saying observe your environment, and these words tend to imply that we're using our eyes, but observation comes in multiple forms, and using multiple senses is very helpful. Going back to Sherlock Holmes, he's not just looking with his eyes, but he's also moving things around, touching things, engaging with the objects that he's observing to get a better sense of the current situation. So for example, if you're watching your mother cook something, yes, literally just watching her will probably give you a lot of information, but actually helping her cook will give you so much more experience and understanding really miss watching my mom cook. As kids, driving with our parents, you can absolutely get a sense of how to drive, how to stay safe, you know, how turn signals work. But until you get behind the driver's seat, until you're actively driving around your neighborhood, you really don't fully understand how driving works. Same concept, right? We want to be active participants in the world. We want to be present-minded as possible. We want to listen, maybe ask questions to better understand. And just like with any skill, your ability to observe the world, your ability to actively participate in the world will improve over time. And especially in the activities that you care about the most, you will get to a point where you can quickly observe a situation in order to understand whether it's safe, vice in the beginning where it might take you a minute to assess a situation properly. In the subject of staying safe while traveling, there are some background experiences that can definitely curate a safer experience for you. My experience in the Navy has definitely opened my eyes to a lot of safe and unsafe situations, and it really helped in preparing me for RV life as well as life overseas and just in different environments. And so if the idea of staying safe while traveling is intimidating for you, I do recommend taking classes and or learning more about things like first aid, CPR, how to stop a fire, maybe learning the language of the country you're trying to go to, learning how to read a map, improving your driving skills, learning how to pack your bags, etc., etc. And again, while learning these topics via Google is a certain level of participation, true participation would be a more hands-on approach to learning these different topics. And you'll hear me say this all the time, that travel is rehab. While being present in your current environment is absolutely super helpful in honing your gut, an argument can be made that really you're honing your gut for a particular destination. And so the more you travel, the more you can live in different places and observe different environments, the more you can understand human behavior, vice how people act in one particular spot. Okay, and so this is a clip of a video that I recorded when I was living in Mexico in San Cris. A little bit about the situation back then. Multiple things happening today. Number one, there was a blockade today between San Cris and Tuxtla. Tuxtla is a large city that is to the west of us, and there's really only one main road to get there, one highway to get there. So one of my friends that lives kind of on the outskirts, if you will, of San Cris was going into San Cristobal. And it's not that I was an expert at all about the things that were happening around me. It's just that I made it a practice, and I've always made it a practice to, within reason, right, while still living my life, to keep track of kind of what's happening, like what's going on in the place that I'm living. This is something that I noticed a lot of people living in Mexico as well as other places just didn't do. Well, I don't think it's necessary, meaning I think everyone observes life in their own way. Everyone observes the world in their own way. There is just a lot of safety related benefits with taking occasional time to observe the area you're in. And so when something would happen, not that I would know necessarily all the ins and outs, who was fighting who, etc. I just knew what I needed to know in terms of staying safe. And I knew it because I conversed with people in real time. I got to see people's viewpoints. And it's not that I believed everything that I read or heard or whatever, because people represent themselves in so many different ways. So it's not a matter of believing everything you hear so much as taking time to notice people's actions. And a shooting in Soriana. This shooting that happened in Soriana probably taught me so much about the heart, honestly, of Chiapas. It was honestly one of my favorite videos to watch while I was living there. And so I was, as a YouTuber, I was kind of compelled. I'm like, I have to share this video, at least with my members, and just at least lightly discuss what we're seeing. Taking time to not just look at something and react like, oh my gosh, shooting, but what specifically are you seeing about the shooting? What can you learn about the people involved when you see a video about a shooting? Like, there's so much more than just, danger, danger, so much more. And it was this practice, this taking my time to observe, that let me feel this is not a situation that I need to run away from. It was one of the first thoughts I had, was to look at the price of flights, but I slowed my brain down, I slowed my heart down, and I was able to kind of assess, what am I really looking at here? And do I actually need to leave? And ultimately, we stayed more than a year, after that incident occurred. It all starts with honing your ability to observe. And I do worry, in this world of cell phones and internet, etc., we are learning less observation skills and more the ability to take on other people's data. We have a tendency to trust less of our own judgment, less of our own experiences, and more the experiences of the people on TV, the people on the internet, the people who are experts in their field telling you these things. Listen, nothing trumps personal experience, but if you don't hone your personal experience, if you're not able to objectively observe your own life experiences, I mean, it's setting you up for failure. It's setting you up for really unsafe situations. You ever watch those videos of people doing unsafe things and you're like, they're crazy? But really, they might just be more experienced than you in doing the unsafe activity, and therefore, for that person, it's actually not unsafe at all. Now, practice makes perfect, but once you learn to hone the skills of observation, you will naturally start honing the skill of critical thinking, which will have the effect of making you a little bit more skeptical of the things people say. Because what you're doing essentially is comparing new information with the known, the information that you already have, especially from first-hand experiences. As people, we do tend to believe the things we hear, the things we're told, so we have to practice the out-of-the-box thinking or questioning attitude in order to better assess the situation, which will lead to the ability to make better decisions so that we can stay safe. And so when somebody makes a statement like Mexico is dangerous, or RVing alone is dangerous, traveling alone as a woman is dangerous, that statement is true, but it's also really not true. Or when you see all these videos of college kids not able to answer basic civics questions, let's be honest, they look kind of stupid. But is it perhaps that you're asking them questions that are kind of designed to make them stupid, questions that people aren't teaching as much anymore, and therefore the kids aren't retaining it as much? Is it possible that if you ask them different questions, they would sound a little bit like geniuses? And instead of thinking that when it comes to RV life or travel life, that you always have to go to the popular destinations, or you always have to go with a travel group or follow a particular itinerary, you'll realize that you have the skill within you. You have the gut instinct within you to know when a situation is safe or not, to know if you should be going there or not. A lot of these observation skills are experience specific, meaning the more you've traveled, the more travel related gut instincts you're going to have, but also just the more you know people, whether they travel or not, just the more you understand people, the better you are able to identify unsafe situations. And kind of related, the more you're able to know yourself in different situations, and the better able you are to mitigate those different risks and dangers. And so for some people that might include things like traveling in a group, while others it might actually include things like traveling alone. Maybe they don't have the best travel buddies to stay safe. I'm a huge fan of traveling light, keeping my schedule flexible, and there's a whole host of things that I try to keep an eye on to make sure that I have the best experiences while traveling, especially in places I've never experienced before. And so a lot of times when I hear travel advice from other people, I honestly ignore most of it.
Our top 10 van life essentials.
Things I travel with that just make sense.
Everything you need to pack for an all-inclusive vacation.
It's the top 10 things they need, not necessarily the top 10 things that we need. You become a little bit more skeptical at absolute statements like that. This place is so pretty. And so the more you observe the world with as objective an eye as possible, and the more you observe yourself interacting with this world, not only will your critical thinking skills naturally improve to where you can recognize when something is probably not true, when something should be taken with a grain of salt, you can hone the last skill that is pointless if you don't have the foundational skill of observing the world, which is actually trusting your gut, making the decision, knowing when and how you should start the engine up and leave. You'll learn the skill to look at an Airbnb ad and without ever stepping foot in the house, knowing this is probably a bad idea. As well as, of course, showing up in an Airbnb and realizing, oops, made a mistake, and then deciding, is it safe enough to stay for at least one night while I figure out where to sleep tomorrow? Or do I really need to run away like right now? And so safety becomes a much bigger topic, a much bigger discussion, as it should be when you learn how to observe people and nature, to include yourself. A lot of the worries and fears have a tendency to right size. I'm not saying they'll go away, but they'll become more appropriately relevant. Because if you don't have keen observation skills, then you won't be able to critically assess a situation. And you'll find yourself doing one of two things. Either putting yourself in a bubble, never traveling, never going anywhere, never taking risks, or taking every risk that's out there. And as difficult as it may be, to slow down and to observe. Why do you think people love camping so much? Why do you think people love getting out in nature so much? It's not the snakes, it's not the poison oak, it's not the lack of AC. It's that a lot of the distractions go away so that you can think clearly. And that is the one skill that I'm seeing less and less of. That is how we stay safe. That is how we can learn to trust our gut instincts.